have a friend of mine, Arjuna O'Neill. He's the co-founder of Share Necessities, which we'll get into a little bit later. We met through a mutual friend uh, who, well, you guys met in like a coffee shop, and you guys just found out you had some of the same objectives, and
We met at another mutual friend Christmas party.
there it is, mutual friends.
Dear friend, give her a mad shout out, a very inspirational friend of mine, Libby Crow.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we met at her Christmas party.
You guys just got to chatting up, and he found out that you're a very interesting dude, which I found out shortly afterwards. So yeah, I would like to just, I know you have an interesting story, so I just want to start from the start, man. Let the people know you. So where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, on the east side, east side of Detroit.
And what was that like?
In a nutshell, it was distant. I'll say it was distant, and it was like I felt like I was in a far off place, very far from my true essence as a human being, connected to my heart, feelings, and emotions.
Yeah.
If I had to sum that up, to give somebody a visual.
Yeah. So what was like the actual external environment like?
Well, I was raised by somewhat, I want to say this, the mindset of a street entrepreneur. My father was pretty well known in the street industry at that time as a young man, and you know, he, as his way of being brought up, he thought that was what he should pass on to his sons, and so that was my lifestyle. I was raised to be a street militant or a street entrepreneur, whatever term you like to use. Society labels us as drug dealers, but we can take that on a whole nother level. But and then my mom was a very devoted spiritual seeker. At the time, they practiced the Hare Krishna faith, which is what I was raised in. So one side of me learned about compassion, kindness, love, humility, and then the other side was total contradictory, that the exact opposite.
Yeah. And so, like, did you continue up with the Hare Krishna faith throughout your childhood?
Yeah, I stayed around a lot of it at the time. You know, being African American, there wasn't I think one other family at the time that was African American that were attending the temple that I was living near in Detroit. So a lot of it didn't make sense. I didn't understand it. I didn't really know how to connect with it and find my purpose at that time. So it was challenging. Yeah. But I there was a part of it too where I did find, on a deeper level, I felt like there was an essence to it of the overall purpose of life. And so there was that as an inert feeling, awareness, but then there was the external things around me. So it was a battle with that correlation or that distance or the polarities of that for maybe 20 years of my life.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to back up a little bit because I actually don't know all that much about the Hare Krishna faith. So what was that like? Like, you're going to a temple once a week or something? Or?
Well, my mom was a full-time, what they would call a devotee. And so she was at the temple 24/7. And we hung out while she did what they consider, the term we use is service, while she took care of the deity, the form. In a physical form, it's, one may see it as a statue, but it's the term that they use is a deity, where she cared and handled the services and the rituals and the ceremonies of that faith.
Yeah. And were you learning like mindfulness practices at this time through the faith? Or?
Yeah, when you look back, because the teachings are to be heart-centered. The teachings are to be compassionate, self-love, but also devote thyself to the Lord. So the lifestyle is to lead a life of compassion, humility, kindness, but also giving everything to God first, offering it to God first.
Okay. And Yeah, I imagine those, even if you didn't have this other side of your life that you had going on, I imagine those kind of concepts can be tough to wrap your head around as a kid anyways, especially like being one of the two black families in the church or temple, sorry,
Yeah,
not church.
it's okay.
But yeah, let's let's touch on that other half. Like, what were you doing outside of the temple? Like,
So once I reached about 15,
mm-hmm.
I was introduced to what was going on behind the scenes, and which involved, like I said, everything contrary to spirituality, more of this world, or some may call dark forces. And at that time, that's what pretty much was happening just around the city, not just within the inner city, but, if we had to keep it real, within the political realms and all of that. So everybody seized the opportunity to gain whatever wealth, material wealth, through the degradation of human society. And so I was exposed to that as well. 15, I received my first firearm, and received my first experience with, selling drugs.
So were you still in school at this time, or did you leave school?
No, I stayed in school. I always enjoyed learning. My mom, God bless her heart, much love. I know my mom's probably gonna be watching this soon, or she's be chiming in soon, because that's just how we connect. We're like best friends, and I love you. And yeah, my mom was always a very well-grounded being. I mean, the tenacity that she had in her character to be able to still, it was three of us. I have an older brother and a younger sister, to still teach us the teachings of humility, compassion, self-love, and kindness in the midst of what she learned to be the exact opposite after she, married my father. And so there was always, I guess you break it down, there's here and then there's here, and so I was like in between, off and on. Like I was like a conscious street entrepreneur. I was a conscious dealer.
Yeah.
I served the drugs, but I also cared. I had to, hold a certain mentality, about, in order to be in the streets. But then there was still that deep-rooted consciousness, that spirituality that I was connected to from growing up in the temple. And it was pretty ironic. It was always trippy. And it always left me questioning. I was always questioning, like, how can you do this but feel this way? Nothing that I did, my characteristic didn't fit none of the profiles of the street. So it had its advantages and disadvantages. It's hard to explain, but I feel like I was always who I am now, but just with a layer of, crusty shit on top of the surface.
Yeah, just kind of being pulled by your environment. And I think if nothing else, that proves the power of the environment around you. Like you have this really strong relationship with your mother who's preaching peace and love. Yet the pull of the city around you still pulls you into something that, as you said, really wasn't yourself.
Yes.
So I wonder if around that time were you infecting the people in that other world, like the street entrepreneur world, with a little bit of the wisdom of Hare Krishna or anything?
Yeah, it was interesting. As I got a little older, and I kind of started to realize that I just have to accept it, because my mom wasn't changing. She wasn't going anywhere. Her heart was committed, and it was pretty much out of the bag. Everybody knew what was going on. They saw her in her Indian attire, they asked questions, and at some point I just had to say, excuse my language, but fuck it, like, if I can't accept it, at least accept it from my mom, because I watched how she did everything to take care of me and my brother and sister. And so I said, well, if you can just receive it and try to understand it for her sake, because of all the hard work that I witnessed, I was like, okay, cool. So I kind of started talking to my homies about it, and I was like, well, how can I make it fun? How can I make it interesting?
Yeah.
So it was kind of like, hey, you want to check something out? that you would never see in the hood, something that's totally different. And we would get high, smoke a little weed and go and just vibe off of it. But when you stepped inside the temples are always built so elegantly, and it looks like a palace, the way they're decorated. So we just were in awe of the difference of what we saw, of how it was decorated, how the space was laid out. So if anything else, I really didn't know how to break it down to the friends. Nobody really understood it, but there was a part of it. It was like a kid, in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. If I had to break it down, you're just like, wow. Yeah,
there's some curiosity there.
Yeah.
And we'll touch back on all that eventually, but I want to continue moving forward with your story. Like, so what inspired you to start breaking away from that lifestyle, the street entrepreneur lifestyle?
I don't think anything really inspired me to break away from it. Mm-hmm. I think what happened is my quest to become the best at it, in a sense of earning that love, that acceptance from my father. Like any child, they want the validation and the love of their parents. I mean, it's in our natural DNA. Mm-hmm. So I think my quest to really dive deep and find that pushed me beyond the veil of what I saw in the streets. I wanted to be perfect at everything I did. So I think having that as a goal, I went so deep into it that I lost myself. But, they say you hit rock bottom, and that's usually what happens when you open up. So I went to the other side, of just where I kind of like pretended I buried all of that consciousness, that awareness. And there was a point where my internal being was like, this doesn't serve you. But at that time, I was so deep in it, I didn't have a practice to get out of it. I didn't have anything connected. I didn't have a regiment spiritually outside of just going to the temple, because that's what was around me. That's what was common to me based on growing up. So that being the case, I feel like I was so angry at the life. I was so wanting to know, like, God, well, where are you? What's up? How is this possible? How can I have these thoughts, and how can I feel this way in such a dark place? Why do I want to help people? Why do I want to not, see anybody get hurt, but at the same time, I'm exchanging a drug for the money, carrying a pistol, but at the same time, I don't want to just shoot anybody just cause, Mm-hmm. And so from having that, I think there was a relationship that I wasn't aware of, because I'm talking to the higher self. And when I look back, I'm like, wow, I was talking to God the whole time. We were kicking it, and he just kept guiding me. But he knew, I feel like, and this is my own spiritual speculation, or what I call to be true within my life from what I've seen. The God already knew what time it was. He knew what I needed. And he allowed me to have this journey where I chose it, but he kept showing me, hey, I'm right here. You choose this, but I'm right here. And like I said, I wanted my dad to just be so happy with me, so proud, that I kept going deeper and deeper. But he's like, hey, down there, I'm still here. To the point where it was like, boom, it took an instance where I was fatally shot. And the saga unfolds.
Yeah. So let's describe that instance if you want to. Like,
yeah. Well, fast forward. Spent my teens, trying to be of service in the way that I thought was of service to my father, and to receive that love. And again, the streets. In these streets, and it's not just in the inner city streets or the streets of selling drugs, just in the material world, how we'll break it down like that. Just in this material world, there are always forces that are to take you and distract you from your higher self. There's always the illusion of the things that are around you are real, but they're not, and outside of I feel there's consciousness, and then there's unconsciousness, and then there's spirituality. And what happened for me was I battled with the surrender to just either be conscious or be spiritual. A lot of us see spirituality, or it's taught that there are so many sacrifices that must be made. There are so many things that you go without in order to be a spiritual being. And so I battled with knowing the truth from being shot, and how that even came about. Again, my mother, so connected to her seeds. She had a conversation with me that morning, and she didn't know how to say it to me, but she just said, "Hey, stick around. Don't go anywhere. I'd rather you stay home. Let's just hang out. I'll cook." And again, dedicated to the madness, because I believed if I'm going to do it, good or bad, I'm going 110. I'm going to give it my all. And so I heard what she had to say, and I just said, well, this is the choice I'm going to make. But there's a part of me that felt like, man, well, if you don't come out on the other side, just know that Moms did share her love. She tried to guide you. And so I went on this mission, and at the other end of that mission was the experience of being shot in the femoral artery. And that moment, the way it all played out, again, God was standing right there. I know we talk about God a lot in ways where we think, oh, God wouldn't let this happen, or God did this to this person. And from my experience and the way I interpret it is that God just gives us what we ask for. It's that simple. That's just how awesome he is. And so, at that time, I was going to the temple and going to church with my grandmother. So I had Jesus and I had Krishna. That we was rolling together. But what was crazy about it was I would go to the service on Sunday with my grandmother and then go to the temple in the evening with my mom. And then there was like biblical terms, and then there was the Hindu version of spirituality, their Bible from the Bhagavad Gita. And it was a lot of correlation, so I was confused, just really confused. And then the confusion blinded me just a little bit. So when I saw the situation present itself, I didn't know which was higher self and which was the ego, which was the material modes, the material energies around me that was sucking me in. And so I see this person with a gun standing there, and at the same time, I'm mindless. I'm like so disconnected from my heart, who I am as a being, that I challenged it. I'm like, well, if you're real, if this is real, then do what you got to do. This is what I'm telling the person in so many words: do what you got to do. And then there's another part of me that's like, dude, like, are you serious right now? You're going to stand here and tell a person with a loaded gun to pretty much take your life? So, and I was one of those kind of people that I had to know. And my mom will tell you this, I just needed to know. You could tell me that fire was hot, or don't stick that butter knife in the socket, you'll get electrocuted. So what? Let me feel that. I need to have that experience. And I think a lot of us are like that. We know. Yeah. And so standing here looking at this person, but then there was a moment where I'm looking into the eyes of this person, and I could see the hurt. I saw this person's pain, this person's sadness. This person really didn't want to do it. But in the streets, out here in the material world, it's either one way or the other. And how the mentality is on the streets is, once you put yourself out there, it's really hard to take that back, because at that moment, if you, what we would say, cowered out, you're branded. And so I saw where I could see this person like, but I'm here now. And I responded in a way that was not smart, and I think that was my interpretation of the hurt and the pain that I was feeling. Like, well, let's just get it over with. Let's do it. And in that moment, I feel like God transferred in this person's body, because I could see where they were like, no. But it was too late. It was a revolver. The gun had already been cocked, and the gun went off. And in that moment, I had two choices right then and there. I knew it. I was like, wow, this person just shot me. Now I have another gun that's behind me, and I'm like, I can forgive this person, or I can retaliate. And real quick, real split second, I just thought about it real fast, and then again, the higher self of me just said, forgive this person. And in that moment, the person that shot me began to weep and cry and break down, and I had compassion. I almost understood. I forgave this person in this moment. And that's when I knew. I said, oh, shit, this is it. This isn't. And I didn't know if I was going to live or die. But I felt like I was dying because of the way I was bleeding. And I put my finger in the wound from what I learned in school. And I knew I needed to stop my heart rate from the education that I was taught, slow the blood down, you have to relax the mind. And so that's when the practice became real, surreal. It had to be applied in that moment. And I think that was the deepest I've ever gone into a meditative state or a spiritual state, a higher level of consciousness, because I had to talk to myself in a way where I could slow the bleeding down, maintain, and then there was a conversation with God where pretty much I received the basic instructions of why I was here, what I was to do. And then I was told that I would have the experience of what they would call near death, or you would die and you'll be back. And from that, I was rushed to the hospital, DOA, dead on arrival. Flatlined a few times. 14 hours of surgery, lost 75%, I think 75 to 85% of the blood in my body. And I came out of it, and I was trying to explain that to the doctors that I was going to be okay. But of course, they blamed it on the gunshot wound and PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. You're in shock. And I was like, well, you know what? They don't get it right now, and it's okay. Let me just focus on me. So I think that's even where the self-practice started. Like everything that I've learned that my mom was trying to teach me about spirituality, the humility, the compassion, it all, in that moment, everything played up. It was the perfect test for it all. Forgive this person that pulled the trigger. Forgive yourself for putting yourself in this situation, for not trusting your mother's wisdom and words. Be compassionate to yourself. Be compassionate to this person who just shot you. Like everything, the conversations that I had to have with myself, to walk through this, to stay sane, I guess, to heal. It all started because I already knew that there was only so much the doctors could do based on scientific and medical studies. God told me somewhere, he let me feel that there was more that I had to do on an internal level, on a personal level. And so all that played up in that moment.
And it's a powerful story, man. So I imagine you were in the hospital for a bit of time. What happened when you were released?
I stayed in the hospital about 5 months.
5 months, wow.
Yeah, the surgeries were deep, and the bullet ripped through a lot of stuff. It tore up a lot of stuff, damaged the body. Mm-hmm. And I had to sit in there to heal. But when I left the hospital on my own accord, stubborn again, realizing after the spiritual flow and connecting into that energy, because I don't want to say forced into it, but it was challenged. It was right there. And we all have those moments where we hit that high where we're like, we're ambitious, we're spiritually connected, we know it. We're like, it's in our essence that this is for me, I'm going to get it. And then there's those moments where, like the pendulum, we swindle, right? And so there was that moment where, okay, the material life kicked back in. You're a young man. There's no way that you can be paralyzed. There's no way that the streets are going to do this to you. There's no way that you're going to let somebody take your fame, your street glory, and everything you've built. So that mind started kicking in. And so I left the hospital. I was like, no, I'm not waiting. I'm not waiting for medical. I'm not waiting for medicine. It's like, I'm going to heal. I'm going to do this. So I called family members. We pretty much just discharged myself. They carried me out. We drove. And that's when I realized that I was not able to use my legs. So I was paralyzed for about a year. And laying in the living room floor with my mom, you know how as kids or young adults, where like we despise the unlimited access of parental guidance.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't leave. I had nowhere to go. And Mom knew it, and she took advantage of that opportunity to just sprinkle it all back in. She's like, you can't go anywhere now. So I was surrendered to that. And we talked through it, and I reprogrammed the mindset, saw life totally different. And I understood that from that, to heal, to get back into my body, to be able to walk again, to really change the way I was seeing things, I had to realize that shit happens to everybody. Every person on this earth has an experience that's not good, that doesn't feel good. So if you had this experience, but you're able to be aware of what's happening, in tune with what's happening, you have a mother here to support you, have compassion for those that you know. I've known guys that got shot down, gunned down in the middle of the street, nobody there, no family, nothing, just watched them die. So it made me look at my experience. Yeah, I've been shot. Horrific. But it was like, no, you were shot, but you have an opportunity to heal. You have an opportunity to be with your mom still, your family. You have an opportunity to be loved. So it took away a lot of the victim, like, oh, I've been shot. And it actually empowered me. I'm like, I'm blessed. Because, again, shit happens to everybody. But just we all are at different levels of the experience based on whatever our, I guess, karma or our way we show up in the world.
And so after a year of being paralyzed on the floor, your mom feeding you all this wisdom, and now you're kind of forced to really hear it, and you've seen it for yourself. Like, what was it like getting back into the world once you could actually move around again? What was that process like? Did you go through physical therapy or something? Or
I taught myself. Because of the level of consciousness and awareness that I was having, I knew talking about it and trying to connect with someone in that moment, it wouldn't have made sense. You know, it was like, it was at that point where it was just me and God. We're best buds. And I had no choice but to become be the best friend and listen. And so there was that. And then there was the reality, like you said, well, how does the world see me? How does street life see me? How does the mentality of being a street entrepreneur going to see me? And so then that kicked in. So again, the monkey mind. Now I'm back in here and not in my heart. And so now I'm battling between serving the material aspect of life versus what needs to keep happening within my heart space. And so, it's the streets. You don't want to look like a coward. But then I got caught up in that. And then in that moment, God was like, hey, I'm right here. And I was like, well, hold on. Some things do have to play out just the way they are. You were shot. Streets are going to see you as weak. How can you use it? And then I had this moment where I was like, wait, take this street underdog story, because you've been shot and you survived. You were paralyzed. People are going to see that as, in the hood, it's, oh, he's a gangster, or he's a G, or, Tupac or Biggie or whatever, however people connect with being shot and coming back. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, how can I use this attention, these eyes on me, to totally change everything about the way this lifestyle is being perceived? How can I put a God spin on it? So, of course, I went back to the streets. I taught myself how to walk. I'd bought a self-propelled lawnmower from Home Depot, and I would just cut the grass, and limp. And, you'd hear lawnmower 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night. It's like, I was training. And different things, different elements. Being a vegetarian my whole life helped. Plant-based foods, organic foods, all that stuff is connected. The body began to heal, and the mindset and reading the affirmations and being open to the love, and just, it healed me. Of course, it was a lot of work, but then it was time to be faced with the reality of being seen in public, and that was the real challenge. That's where I battled again. It broke me down psychologically. I thought I was ready because I had this interaction with God. I'm like, I got it, I'm good. But then there was the real, reality. I'm out here. I've been shot. I've sold drugs all these years. You did some dark things, And then I reverted back to the lack of self-worth, uncompassionate to myself. And I got back in the streets without having the awareness of why I went back. Without having the consciousness of I'm supposed to use the story to help people. I kind of got back in it from the victim state, or I got a point to prove. And so I battled back and forth on that ladder. Like, I understood it and I didn't. I understood and I didn't. But then there was a point where it just stopped, where I was like, okay, I got everybody's attention. And then I just jumped back on. Somehow I was able to jump back on the conscious plane and start talking about, the morals that God gave me, the compassion, the practice. And it all started just coming together, and it just started flowing in a way where people were like, hey, I would love to have that experience. I would love to get out of that. I would love to learn how you did that. How did you change?
Yeah. And is that where the roots of Share Necessity come from?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. I feel when I sit back and when I meditated on it, it was the process. It was the process of going all the way to the dark side, as they say, or playing an evil, and then waking up, tapping into that God consciousness that we all have, and surrendering to the higher power, and realizing that actually there's more sweetness on the spiritual side of things, even though we never see it, because God does it the way he feels, I feel like, or it happens the way it in the timing that it should happen, versus when we're trying to make things happen. We relate to that more because we feel that we're in control, and we can kind of take it when we want it, or get it when we want it, or give it when we want it, versus just allowing the natural process to flow. And it's interesting. I still play with it, but I've just learned to enjoy it all and share as a tool of just not to tell somebody how to live their life and not to tell somebody how to be, but just share the beauty of it, of just having ebbs and flows. And that's where Share Necessities came from. It was more about seeing people and everybody in a way that anybody's story for me could be my story. Anybody's situation, their tragic situation, could be me, because we all get out here, we go outside, there's cars, there's opportunities, we're in public, you never know. So
you want to explain a little bit about what Share Necessities is, what the goal is?
Well, Share Necessities started from a space of just, how can I share what little bit of knowledge and understanding that I've learned over the years of recovery coming from the streets. I was blessed to move here to California, stay in Santa Monica. I found yoga as a practice, so the meditation and yoga became a daily regimen for me. It was part of my daily dose of just living. And from that, I couldn't hide from the truth. I couldn't hide from what I was seeing. And when I mean couldn't hide, I couldn't hide from what I was feeling within my heart space of knowing what I knew, had the experience that I've had. And so I said, well, let me start with the basics. Let me just start with helping somebody. And being in Santa Monica, there was always someone there in need. And of course, it was mostly the homeless people that I saw that were in need. So we started with providing the basic necessities. When I first came to California, I experienced being homeless for a few months due to some other situations that took place. And the homeless community that I met were like some of my best friends, some of the greatest teachers. What I learned and what I saw from the beings that were living on the street and how they accepted that reality and the way they still pushed to get up every day and still figure it out and just live, even if they didn't have a goal to get back into society or get a car again or get a house again, but just to be awake.
Yeah. So, and were you helping people were you just talking to people on the streets, or did you have a facility or anything?
At that time, it was just relationship building. Mm-hmm. And what I realized, I was learning me. I was learning how to be that person. It became a practice. It was like preparation to where Share Necessities is now, and I'll get into that. But it was preparation to learn how to be compassionate, pretty much to myself, 24/7, and to other people. And then it went into, okay, so being on the streets, I learned that there's plenty of organizations that provide food, but there isn't really a huge supply of basic necessities. What we get to wake up to every day is privileged human beings that have access to toothbrush, toothpaste, shower, soap, clean clothes, clean pair of socks. I mean, you imagine just getting up every day, even if you had a home and didn't touch any of those things and go out, you just feel different. And so that's where we started. That's what was asked of us. I learned that, sometimes we want to do good things in this world, but we want to do them based on what we think needs to be done. And sometimes it's not about what you want to do for a person. It's more of asking God or asking the people that you feel need that exchange with you, what do you need? And so that's what was asked of me, was if I could provide the basic essentials. And so I also learned that trying to give somebody something can come off different, Mm-hmm. Me walking up to somebody that I see on the street that's homeless and saying, hey, you need this, could be offensive because I don't know their current state. I don't know why they are in that space. So what I learned was that instead of trying to give somebody something, share, hey, can I share this with you? And it changed the way things work. So that's where you have the share necessities, sharing the necessities of, I feel, life.
Mm-hmm. And the shared necessities that I know today has evolved into offering a bunch more stuff. So you want to talk about where you guys are now?
Yeah. So after learning that, again, giving people material things is only going to take them so far. Mm-hmm. We all know that material things only give us so much. But as humans, human beings, there's a connection that we our birthright to be connected to other human beings. We're all connected. So that started to manifest in ways where it was very clear beyond just handing somebody these material items. Because in those exchanges, what seemed to be the most profound and what seemed to really change the life, it wasn't just, hey, here goes a pair of socks, here goes some toothpaste. It was like, hey, hold on. How are you today? How you feeling? How you been? I haven't seen you in a week. It was the conversation and the dialogue between the actual giving the material. It was the heart exchange. Yeah. And so from there, I realized that, okay, this is what it's really about. It's not about the material objects or handing somebody a water. It was about giving somebody my heart space or giving that person the opportunity to share their heart space. And so I wrote a program based on mindfulness, based on those principalities of just being a human being, morals and values, compassion, kindness. I see you, you see me. I don't need to know who you are, but like I said, in my educated guess, you've been a person that's probably been exposed to some type of discomfort, some type of situation where you could use a hug or some love or some kind words, because I feel that. I go through that. So that's where the core of it lies.
Yeah. And then I know you, with sharing both these basic necessities and the more spiritual or compassion side, yes. you focus more on like the younger generation now, right?
Yeah. Well, think about it. We use these terms and everything becomes in America. We turn everything into an industry or some level of I want to say an achievement on a personal level. And my thing is, if we want to see change, if we want to see our future, we use the term future all the time. I feel like there's only so much we could do in these years as adults, but then there's these children that have their whole lives ahead of them. And they're seeing all the stuff that we're seeing as an adult. I feel like if the things that I'm witnessing as an adult, the chaos that I'm witnessing as a grown man affects me the way it does, I can only imagine what it does to a child or a young teen or a young adult who may not even have the understanding of why this is even happening. And so for me, it was like plant those seeds. Just plant the seeds. It's not here to say, hey, kids, you need to have this. You must do this in order to be successful. It's more, let me just plant some seeds of just being just a compassionate, kind, loving human being. And you'll know what to do with that as your life unfolds and those experiences. But if we don't plant those seeds and all they're getting is what we see online and all the madness and nobody's teaching them, then what do you expect?
Yeah. And I really appreciate like the few times that I've been down there, how you focus on building a sense of community around there, and really not trying to put any pressure on anyone to come in, but just showing that it's an available space, it's an option. Like, and it seems to have a really positive response with everyone that stops by there. I just think it's a beautiful thing, man. And
sharing from the heart. That's our thing, sharing from the heart and bringing inner peace to the streets. How do you do that? Well, some people are in some places that we can't really fathom. Yeah. I can't tell you how bad this other person is going through or whatnot. But what I do know is if I just let that person know that whatever you're going through, like how God always kept waving at me, there's somebody over here that does care, that will try to understand or hang out with you for a minute till you feel better. Yeah, that's a start. Yeah. The basics.
So if people want to play a part in this, if people want to help out trying to share these necessities or even trying to help you in particular, what should they do? What kind of advice do you have for them, or where can they go?
Well, our world revolves around the social aspect of things, the internet. We have our website, share-necessities.org. You can learn about some of the intricate details of my story or what we're doing. Of course, like anyone that owns a business, websites always need to be updated. But you can go there. You can connect with me at info@share-necessities.org. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Share Necessities. My personal page, Arjuna O'Neill. And reach out. We plan on doing some things soon where we have just a community network where we share necessities, and we're sharing our own connections of how we can just support each other. So there's a lot of cool things coming, so stay tuned.
Perfect. And I'll put all that contact information into the notes when I upload this. And I really appreciate you coming by today, man. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. And as always, guys, you can find me on Instagram at Terrence Davey or at BuffNerdLA.com. Thank you.
God bless.